Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the launch of the Workforce Resilience Through Mental Fitness. I'm Derek Miller, President and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. This is a new campaign from the Salt Lake Chamber's nonprofit Social Impact Foundation, Utah Community Builders. Utah Community Builders was created to give Utah's business community a platform to engage on social issues in a more effective, targeted, and comprehensive way. One of the priorities of Utah Community Builders is mental health in the workplace. Today, we'll be hearing from a number of experts and advocates about the intersection of mental health and work. At the end of today's event, you will hear some clear action items to help you get started. We'll also send you additional information about the suite of resources the Chamber is offering to its members. Thanks to the work of Utah Community Builders and many key partners across our great state. With that, I'd like to introduce the host of today's event, Clark Ivory and Lisa Eccles. Clark is the CEO of Ivory Homes and has been instrumental in the creation and leadership of Utah Community Builders. Lisa is the president and COO of the George S. and Dolores Dora Eccles Foundation. Her guidance and leadership has empowered Utah Community Builders to make tremendous social impact already. And I want to thank all the board members of Utah Community Builders. They are engaged and active community advocates. We're incredibly fortunate to have Clark and Lisa serving as the co-chair of Utah Community Builders Advisory Board, and they join us now to anchor today's presentation.
Thanks so much, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here discussing one of the most pressing issues our state faces, mental health. I also need to thank you for the tremendous leadership you and the Chamber have shown by creating Utah Community Builders and offering a platform to advance efforts just like this one. You know, we have to realize that it's not all about the bottom line. If we take care of our people in our companies as employers, then the rest will take care of itself.
Well, that's right, Clark. And I'm grateful to the Chamber for leading out on this issue that affects all of us here in Utah. Before we introduce our first speaker, we recognize that this effort wouldn't be possible without the support and partnership of Utah businesses who are mindful of social impact. We'd like to give a special thanks to AT&T for being a workforce resilience champion. AT&T is a global business with strong Utah ties. They've taken tremendous steps to elevate the mental and emotional fitness of their own employees. And they're also helping lead the charge for the business community through their Believe Salt Lake initiative, which will be part of the Workforce Resilience campaign in January of 2021. So again, thank you to AT&T for being a workforce resilience champion.
We are all aware of the heartbreaking statistics and stories about suicide right here in our own state. Mental health is a complex issue with many variables that go far beyond the simplistic categories of mentally ill or mentally healthy.
Utah Community Builders is launching the Workforce Resilience campaign because it is more important than ever to address mental health, not only in our workforce, but in our entire state. As you may all be aware, the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic effects have caused a huge spike in symptoms of anxiety and depression. But the good news is we can all act now to prevent this from becoming a new epidemic of mental illness or even suicide.
Today's event will equip you with three things: information, tools, and then action items to move forward on. Our goal: to elevate the resilience of our workforce by creating a business culture that fosters mental fitness. We must remove the stigma around these conversations. because mental fitness encompasses all of us. Whether we have a diagnosed mental health condition or whether we are feeling the added stress and strain of the challenges we face right now, we're all part of this solution.
2020 is certainly a unique and challenging year in so many ways. So let's put this year in context of mental and emotional wellness. For instance, when an employee is stressed, what does that look like? How does that affect the workers and their daily tasks? What can we do to manage it? Here to answer these questions is our first speaker, Mary Beth Vogel-Ferguson with the University of Utah Social Research Institute.
Good morning. My name's Mary Beth Vogel-Ferguson. I'm from the College of Social Work at the University of Utah. Today, I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on surviving and thriving in 2020. Anyone else tired of 2020? If there was ever a need for a time machine to travel forward, it's definitely now. My goodness, and what if you woke up after 6 months in a coma? I wouldn't want to be this woman's husband having to explain what's going on. And definitely, if 2020 was a drink, what would it be? A colonoscopy prep. I don't know what's coming next. Meteorites, aliens, who knows what's on the horizon. Humor is one of my favorite coping strategies, but it's valuable for us to realize that when we're using a coping strategy, it's because there's something challenging there for us to cope with. And 2020 has definitely brought us that. As we think about the year 2020 and the impact that it's had, I think it's helpful to start with how it's impacted us personally. It gives us perspective, another lens. So if you're doing your email or texting a friend, let me ask you to just stop for a minute. Take a moment to think about, what has this year been like for you? Maybe write down 3 stressful events that you've had to manage in this year. Just take a moment to do that. As you think about these things, notice what comes up for you. What emotions are there? How has it felt in your body? Is your heart beating faster? Maybe your stomach gets a little upset or nervous. Maybe you breathe more rapidly. Sometimes it's hard to identify exactly how it feels in our body. But all of these responses you might be experiencing can be referred to as a stress response. And if our 2020 stress response was a muscle, by the end of the year, we'll all be looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. In light of these challenges, sometimes we can wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together and deal with it all? It all has to do with this stress response. It's important to know that a stress response is a normal response to abnormal events. It's to be expected. It is what we would feel, for example, if we ran into this guy. What we are experiencing is a response which is key to our continued existence as a human race. It's our survival instinct. This response is something we all have, no matter who we are. Our family background, our intelligence, our education, it's a part of being a human person in this universe. And this response is rooted in our human brain, complex and amazing. We are literally hardwired for survival. So let's do a quick course in Brain Stuff 101. There are basically 3 parts of the brain. The reptilian brain regulates heartbeat, breathing, body temperature. Our limbic system is the center of that emotion, memory, and learning. And the neocortex fuels our thinking, problem solving, planning. In stressful situations, like a healthcare or fear of losing a job, these events are experienced in the limbic system and can be triggered by a flood of stress hormones that produce predictable changes in the brain. This is our survival instinct, often referred to as fight, flight, or freeze. The fight, flight, or freeze response occurs when we have an experience in which we feel threatened. When that happens, alarm bells go off in the limbic system and set off the fight, flight, or freeze response. When this happens, access to the neocortex, that thinking part of our brain, is cut off, and the survival instinct takes over. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the body to fuel the muscles so that we can react with strength and energy. We've all heard those stories of people displaying super strength to save a loved one. This works well if we're running from danger or chasing a child out into the street. It doesn't work so well if we're trying to navigate a pandemic. So along comes 2020. I don't know about you, but for me, the year started off pretty good. And then the coronavirus hit. It was a rough few weeks. Kids home from school, businesses forced to close, the stock market going down. Yeah, it was rough, but there was hope that by summer, everything would be okay again. Then came the earthquake, the civil unrest, the protests. And then just when we were trying to open up, the virus spiked again. As opposed to sudden threats, we are now faced with more chronic, unpredictable stresses and uncertainty, health scares, political unrest, family issues, and the fear of what's next. It can be overwhelming and exhausting. Our stress responses have been activated over and over. So how can this repeated stress impact us? Nearly every part of our life can be impacted by stress, from thinking to work to social functioning. Each person experiences these stressors in their own way. It can be different depending on how close to home each event hits a person. Did I hear about thousands of people dying, or did my grandmother die? Did my neighbor's business close, or did mine? Was I already experiencing a lot of stressors in my life? I have heard many professionals talk about struggles with focusing and being productive at work while managing all the new demands of this time. Statistics are showing dramatic increases in domestic violence, substance abuse, suicide, and child abuse. And this makes sense. All of us, to differing degrees, have these alarm bells going off regularly. Or if not actually being triggered, we're living with the fear that they might go off at any moment. So it's natural that we might sometimes struggle to access that productive, creative, thinking brain, and we hunker down in survival mode. So why should we care about all of this? Why would we want to know more? I believe human resources are the company or business's greatest asset. I certainly couldn't have done the work I've done without the 100+ research assistants I've employed over the past 20 years. Turnover and retraining is time-consuming and expensive, and engendering loyalty and commitment to our work goes two ways. This period of wild uncertainty will end. What can we learn now to set up for an even stronger future? One key is to be able to reframe how we interpret what is happening around us. If we see employees or ourselves struggling with work issues or time management or focus, behaviors different than I know of that person, it's easy just to think, what's wrong with you? Why aren't they or I working up to our full potential? This is where we need to reframe and stop and think. What's up? What's happening? Wondering, what might this person be experiencing? Maybe they have young kids at school, but every day they hear rumors that schools are going to lock down again. What will I do with my 6-year-old? Another has a grandparent in a nursing home, so many of the deaths are in this population. Another spouse lost a job, and now the whole family's survival rests on my shoulders. The future is so uncertain. There is talk of the new normal, but what will that really look like? Returning to the office will likely mean something different for each person. Maybe it brings out anxiety because I have health issues or kids at home. Maybe it's a relief as my home space doesn't really provide a good work environment. It's a tough balance. Running a business and being aware of and attentive to the stresses faced by our employees and ourselves, but there will be an other side of the crisis. How can I, as an employer, supervisor, manager, make space for the very real challenges we're all facing? Well, we can first recognize survival mode responses in ourselves and others. And where we can, provide transparency, certainty, and flexibility in navigating this new normal. And finally, be patient with yourselves and with others. We can make it through this together. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. Even before COVID-19, there were clear data points showing that more work was needed to address the mental wellness of Utah's workforce. Our next speaker is Dr. Matt Thies, Chief Research Scientist for Safe Lane Health and Associate Professor also at the U of U. He'll walk us through the data on mental health to help us understand the bigger picture.
So I want to start by asking a question. When was the last time that you had a difficult or uncomfortable conversation? How did you feel? How do you think the other person felt? Was it when your parents sat you down and talked with you about the birds and the bees? Was it something at work when you had to let someone go or talk with someone about their poor performance? Thinking about how those interactions work and how your emotions and their emotions play into it is a big part of healthy mental fitness moving forward. So I want to talk about that. I'm going to delve into a little bit about the science behind it, tell you a little bit about me, and then talk a little bit about where we're going with this. So my name's Matt. I'm an occupational epidemiologist. Our company, SafeLane, we are here to help provide those insights, those light bulb moments of where you're having the difficult conversations, but it's not difficult conversations with other people. It's those difficult conversations you're having with yourself. Those times when you sit down and you need some level of introspection. You need to sit down and think about, why did I behave that way? Or why am I feeling like this? And then ding, there's your light bulb. There's where something you can make a change and move forward. I have my PhD in occupational epidemiology. That is, I study health and work and how that overlaps with an individual. My specialties are mental health. I've done a lot with COVID-19, musculoskeletal disorders, and transportation worker health. So truck drivers, railroad workers, even airlines. Within your working environment, there's so many different challenges, and being able to address those challenges in a productive and meaningful way is important. And one thing that science is understanding more and more is the role that your mental fitness plays in how you behave both at work and outside of work. So how productive you are, what you can do, how you influence those around you, whether that's your family or your coworkers, your boss, your clients. All of those things go into this mental fitness and your ability to sit down and ask yourself those challenging and sometimes uncomfortable questions about how you're feeling and how you can move forward with these things. So let's talk a little bit about mental health. I'll be going into more about mental health in a webinar that we have coming up. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But I just want to touch a little bit about mental health and what science is telling us about what we have going on, right? So recently I've finished a 4-year analysis of all of the literature looking at mental health. We've done post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, which are the 3 big ones right now, and traditionally have been the 3 big mental health and mental fitness concerns. So we looked at both the best ways to diagnose them as well as the best ways to treat them. So looking at that and figuring out how can we get our arms around this and how can we give individuals tools to both make decisions about, am I having challenges in mental fitness, or am I doing things well and what do I need to keep doing? And how can I improve? What are some treatments? And a lot of the best treatments out there are not costly. They're not time consuming. Sometimes they're things like aggressive physical activity, moderate or vigorous physical activity 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes is statistically demonstrated to have a positive impact on your mental well-being, whether that's depression or anxiety. I'm also working with the Utah State Bar in looking at attorneys' mental well-being and mental health and helping them craft ways to move forward. So we're looking with attorneys, judges, paralegals, and other support staff, as well as law students, which is really a lot of foundation for where we're going with this and SafeLane with mental health. So let's talk a little bit about what we know. Most common disorders in terms of diagnoses are based on 2018 data. We unfortunately don't have anything new. With this environment that we're in right now with the pandemic, obviously there's a lot of additional challenges, but anxiety, depression, and then this other category are really the most common, by far, the most common diagnosed diseases before the pandemic. Initial data that's out there in research is suggesting that this has actually just been exacerbated, and these may be as high as 60% higher than what they were previously. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody. Different groups, different industries, different types of individuals may be going up and down. The pandemic and challenges may actually have some improvements for some people. I was just talking with some lawyers today on the phone, and one of them brought up how she really loves how she's stuck at home because she gets to spend time with her kids. Before, she had to go to the courthouse every single day, and she missed being with her young children who were 3 and 4 and 5 years old. I think just 2 kids, 3 and 5 years old. So thinking about, how is your mental well-being and your mental fitness being impacted by your behaviors, and what can you do to move forward? Let's talk specifically about Utah and what we have going on. In Utah, the depression rates are meaningfully higher than the rest of the country combined. So when you look at these numbers, there's also an uptrend if you look at that. So Utah is the light blue, the rest of the US is the dark blue. Again, we don't have current data, but looking at the past, meaningful numbers here in terms of how prevalent depression is, and then just overall poor mental health, which includes a whole bunch of other things aside from just depression, is seeing a meaningful uptick in Utah as well. Lastly, I wanted to show some data about the mental health impacts on financial issues, both individual financials as well as a company's financial bottom line. So the light blue line talks about, the financial impacts, the prevalence of financial impacts among individuals who have severe mental health concerns as compared to those who don't have severe mental health concerns. And you can see in all 4 of these different categories, the mental health concerns are twice as high or even higher than those without mental health concerns. So addressing mental well-being and mental fitness not only is good for the individual and good for those around the individual, but it also can have a very positive impact on the bottom line and actually be a very smart financial move for companies. How do you have these tough conversations with yourself? How do you have an introspective conversation or assessment with yourself that can help you identify things that you're doing well, but also identify things that you can improve upon? One solution is this evidence-based help that we have at thelightbulbcure.com. So this is a website that we have set up where we have a comprehensive mental health assessment that covers many different domains to help facilitate that conversation and really do an assessment about where you stand and where you can improve. So it covers domains of depression, anxiety, burnout, which are all negative things that we want to get rid of, but also positive things like engagement. What are you doing well to engage with others, whether that's virtually or in person, as well as satisfaction with life? What are the elements in life that are helping you thrive and giving you satisfaction? All of those domains will be assessed through a series of questions that you can answer honestly. All of these data are completely confidential. Being a researcher, to me, confidentiality is by far the most important aspect of any data collection element. So by providing this information, we will have these tools which give you essentially a score for each of those domains and potential recommendations for things that you can either continue doing that are doing well or ways that you can change to improve and make you better. These are evidence-based recommendations based on tried and true health assessment tools, mental fitness assessment tools that have been vetted within the literature and have showed strong relationships with how diagnosing issues and improving. We invite you to go to thelightbulbcure.com, take this health assessment, know that your data are completely confidential. We're not going to disclose any individual data to anyone. We are going to look at it and provide some aggregate information, looking at total population so that policymakers and others can use that data to help make decisions. But all of your data is completely confidential, and that's very important to us. So we want to empower you to be able to make decisions and provide you with resources, additional resources to be able to move forward and shine bright for others. So that's it. Thank you very much on behalf of Safe Lane Health and all of my colleagues. We hope that you stay mentally fit and continue to stay mentally strong. and join us for our webinar. Thank you very much.
We realize that taking in all this information and knowing what to do with it can feel overwhelming. So, Utah Community Builders has partnered with experts in suicide prevention to create a brand new resource that will be released to all of you at the conclusion of today's event. It's called the Suicide Prevention in the Workplace Employer Toolkit, and it includes a collection of the best practices and resources specifically for businesses. Here to walk you through the toolkit is Amy Mickelson, Suicide Prevention Coordinator with the Utah Department of Health.
Hello, I'm Amy Mickelson. I'm a primary prevention coordinator at the Utah Department of Health in their Violence and Injury Prevention program. Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about suicide prevention in the workplace and introduce you to some great new resources that we'll be launching. First, let's talk about why suicide prevention in the workplace is so important. We know that Utah for many years has ranked in the top 10 for suicide deaths. And more importantly, most deaths that happen in Utah due to suicide are among working-aged adults. We also know that about 60% of adults in the United States are in the workforce. And so we spend an incredible amount of time in our waking hours in our workplaces. And so the workplace is really a critical area for doing suicide prevention and not only saving lives, but also doing things that are going to help our workplaces be more efficient and more effective in the work that they do. So what are we doing? So we've put together this toolkit, and this is a collaboration between the Utah Suicide Prevention Coalition and its workplace work group and the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. We have worked together to create this document that will help work sites understand the importance of suicide prevention in the workplace and have some great action steps for how they can start making those changes in their organization. So to start with, this toolkit, the way it's broken out, first we kind of go into the different types of prevention, because we know that to do prevention well, and especially when we're trying to prevent suicide deaths, it's really important for us to be comprehensive in how we do this. So we have to think about different levels of prevention. And the first one is upstream. Upstream is basically the same thing as primary prevention. It's really things that we do in our organization that can prevent people from getting to a point where maybe they're having a suicidal crisis, or maybe they're experiencing higher levels of stress that affects their mental health. So what are those things that we can do in our organizations to kind of prevent people from ever getting to that point and creating connections and creating support within the organization? The next level is midstream, and we also call this intervention. These are strategies that we implement that kind of help people learn how to seek help when they're needing help. And it also helps us know how to reach out to other people when they're having a hard time and how we can intervene and get them to other resources to help them, hopefully before it becomes a crisis. And then the last one is downstream, or what we call postvention. And downstream postvention is really how do we respond in our organizations when we've lost somebody to suicide, whether it's an employee or maybe a relative of an employee. Like, how do we support the workforce in a way that promotes healing and gets people to the resources that they need during that time and during their grief? So going into the toolkit more specifically, you can see here that the toolkit is broken down into different sections. And the great thing about each of these sections, we have the pre-action, the upstream, the midstream, the downstream, and then getting started. And so we're giving you some really actionable ways to really start this process. So in each section, what it includes is a definition of each of the section and of what these strategies, how they're going to look. Gives you examples of ways that you can do that, as well as access to resources here in our state that can help get you started, whether that's needing to find somebody to come in and do a training, or even having access to other national resources that we have available. We want to make sure that this toolkit provides you with kind of a one-stop shop for all of your needs. So as you're using it, you have access to all the things that you're going to need in order to do something really meaningful in your organization. And then, of course, action steps. How do you even get started? Oftentimes, we get these toolkits and we're not really sure how to start. We have all this great information. We want to make sure that you are prepared to actually start taking action as soon as you read this toolkit. Some other things that we're doing. So the Live On Suicide Prevention Campaign in Utah, this is a brand new suicide prevention and awareness campaign. And I'd like to read to you kind of the mantra behind this campaign. Live On is a statewide effort to prevent suicide by promoting education, providing resources, and changing our culture around suicide and mental health. Together we can get through, reach out, lift up, look ahead, and live on. And really what this is about is this is a mantra for anybody who's been impacted by suicide, whether it's somebody who's had a suicide attempt and has survived their attempt, somebody who's lost somebody to suicide. We want to make sure that people have an opportunity to have hope and find their way to live on. And the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce is partnering with the Live On campaign to promote this campaign more among the workforce. So, like I said, this is a state and public campaign. It was funded by both legislative dollars and private donations. It's a hub of resources too. So if you go to our website at liveonutah.org, it's a hub of resources. So if you're needing help, if you're in crisis yourself and you need help and you need to find those resources, you can find those. If there's somebody in your life that you want to help and you're not sure how to get started, there's resources for that. And then there's great resources for both work sites and community members to find resources for education and other opportunities to build awareness around suicide prevention in their community. And like I said, the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce is going to be promoting this with our workforce. And so we really look forward to this really great opportunity to partner together and really work hard to make sure that we're raising awareness about suicide. But not only that, we're increasing hope in our community that we can prevent suicides as long as we're working together. And so now it's a call to action for you. As we launch this toolkit, the first thing you can do is access the toolkit. Assess how your organization can integrate suicide prevention into your workplace. And this toolkit really gives you some meaningful action steps to be able to start doing that today. And promote the Live On campaign in your organization to really work towards building a culture of safety for all of our workforce. And there is my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me, get additional information, have questions, please reach out. I'm always happy to hear from our community and our workforce.
This is a fantastic resource, and I think it goes beyond just suicide prevention, though that's a vital component of it. I love the downstream, midstream, and upstream analogy, and perhaps for many businesses, the midstream and upstream approach is particularly important. But what does that look like? Blue Novus is a local company that provides resources for businesses to address exactly that. James Hadlock is their founder and change evangelist, and he'll now walk us through some of the ways presidents and CEOs can improve the mental fitness culture in their own business.
In a recent study conducted by Wallet Hub, the financial platform, Utah was named #2 as the happiest states in America. And if you're wondering how they determined this, they looked at all kinds of things like economic status, state, physical activity, and commute times. But folks, I'm afraid there's another side of the story. You see, as we look at mental illness and how it relates to America and Utah, we rank #1 in depression, and we're #5 in suicide. And if you're wondering where Salt Lake City is in all of the cities across America, if you look at what insuranceproviders.com said and the data that they looked at, which was how many prescriptions were prescribed here in Utah, we're #5 in all the cities across the United States. So how do you explain this discrepancy? How do we see ourselves as one of the happiest states around, and on the other side, all the depression and the suicide and mental illness? I'm afraid we're suffering from what I like to call I'm-finitis. What's I'm-finitis? I'm-finitis is us acting as if nothing is wrong, like everything is rosy in our lives. Here's the problem. It drives disconnection. And not only that, it makes us feel like we're a fraud. We can't be ourselves. We can't be real with people. We can't be authentic. The other thing that's a challenge when we struggle from I'm-finitis is we really reinforce the stigma around mental illness. You see, we tell people that it's not okay to not be okay. And I know a little bit about this because you see, I was fine too. At the age of 31, I had one of the fastest growing companies here in Utah. I was making millions of dollars. And from the outside looking in, you would have thought, man, that guy has got it made. But what people didn't know and what I was hiding from the world was that I was fine when I really wasn't. I was struggling with stress and overwhelm and depression and anxiety. And ultimately, even though I was fine, I found myself in rehab twice. And I was in and out of the psychiatric hospital because I was on suicide watch and I was not safe for myself. But the whole time I kept telling myself I was fine. And I'm not the only one that has struggled with I'm fine-itis. When you look at the data here in the United States, 1 in 4 people is currently struggling with mental illness. And one of the biggest challenges that we face is that most people will never reach out and get the help that they need. 8 out of 10. And when you look at what holds them back, one of the biggest contributors is how worried they are about disclosing it and maybe losing their job. So when you think about how many people suffer in silence, it's because of the stigma and job concern. You see, people are afraid and ashamed, and rather than get the help that they need, they'd rather step back, tell you they're fine, and then go about their business. But it is impacting the way that they show up to work. And if we look at the kind of impact it has on the workplace, 61% of people surveyed have said that their productivity is impacted by their mental health. And if we go a little bit deeper and look at the kind of culture that we're creating, 85% of people say that poor communication contributes to their mental health. And leaders don't ever receive the kind of training that they need. In fact, it's 87% of the time. So we have to look at the kind of impact that we're having in the workplace and look at the models that we've been using for the last several decades. Number one, we only look at the crisis, which means that the only time that we really ever address this is when it can no longer be ignored. The second thing, we're using old, outdated models. We assume that people will come to us when they're in pain and when they're hurting, and that's simply not true. So what kind of impact does it have on the workplace? Well, only a negative one. You're not getting the kind of productivity that you hope to get in applying some kind of crisis mindset mental health solution. It reminds me of the parable of the fisherman and going upstream. Imagine for just a moment somebody fishing on the river, enjoying their time, and all of a sudden noticing someone floating down the river, flailing their arms and trying to get to the shore. So the fisherman drops their pole, they swim out, they grab them, and they bring them back to the side. And then it happens again 5 minutes later with another person floating down the river. And then again in 10 minutes, and again another time in 15. In that moment, the fisherman decides to step back and walk upstream to see what is going on with all these people falling down in the river. And here's what they notice. They notice this beautiful overlook, but there's no handrails and there's no signage. And it's clear that people are accidentally falling into the river and floating down. This is where the fisherman has an insight and decides, I wonder what would happen if I went to the hardware store, grabbed some supplies, and built some safety rails and some signage. So that's what they do. Now, I want you to think about this parable for just a moment. You see, there's still a risk that somebody might fall into the river, but they've certainly mitigated the risk and they've done it upstream. In other words, rather than just picking people up downstream and bringing them to shore, he's now addressed an entire community by being proactive. And that's what we have to do when it comes to workplace resilience and well-being. So I find this really interesting in another survey that was done with Mental Health of America and a company in our backyard, Qualtrics. They decided to look at workplace well-being and culture and the impact that leaders have on their environments. They surveyed over 10,000 employees, and here's what they came up with. The number one thing that emerged from the data was that silence is most damaging. What does that mean? that the more that we don't talk about mental health, the more damage we're actually doing. The second thing, that managers are key, that they matter the most when it comes to workplace wellness and resilience. Now, that makes a lot of sense to me, but most of us, I think, have thought that it's the CEO that's got to really bring that. But I want you to just consider the kind of touch that your managers are having with your people. You've got to empower them with better training. And here are the 4 things to focus on. Number 1, more open communication. Normalizing the conversation around mental health is absolutely essential in changing the culture of an organization as it relates to workplace resilience. Number 2, be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is share yourself, be real with your people. I can only imagine what each of us has been going through in 2020 with the ups and downs of the pandemic and race riots and everything else that has come with this year. Have you voiced it? Have you allowed yourself to be seen? Number 3, demonstrate genuine concern. You've got to let your people know that they matter as a person as much as they do as an employee. Remember, these are people with feelings and emotions and challenges and fear and happiness and joy. The more that you can demonstrate genuine concern and show them that they as a person matter just as much as they as an employee, the more trust you'll build with them almost instantly. And lastly, create psychological safety. Provide opportunities to create a safe environment through listening and building trust by being authentic. And what kind of impact will this have on your organization? Deloitte recently published that investing $1 in proactive mental health programs will bring an ROI of $5. So if you're not convinced that this is the right thing to do from a human perspective, this is absolutely the way to do it if you're looking for an ROI for your organization. And that makes a lot of sense to me. You see, people who feel better perform better. Sales increases by 30% and productivity improves by 31%. So as you think about just checking the box and going with the status quo, I want you to consider what it might be like to be more proactive. It is clear from the data and from a human perspective that we must do more than just say, it's fine. Is it okay to really just check the box and move on when it comes to mental health? Or is it time to be proactive and move upstream? I want you to consider the people in your life, your loved ones, your family, your friends, and your coworkers. And I want you to just think about where they're at in their life today. And I wonder, are they fine? Thank you.
If we really want to move the needle and improve the resilience and mental fitness in Utah's workforce, we need to normalize the conversation. Talking about mental health should bring no more shame than talking about our physical health. Yet there is still a stigma. I'm pleased to say there is one group that is helping to change that. Room Here is a new nonprofit organization that wants to ask you to take a pledge. Co-founders Rachel Merrill and Trent Mono are with us to explain.
Hi, I'm Rachel Merrill, and this is Trent Mono, and we're the co-founders of a nonprofit organization called Room Here. So we focus on mental fitness in the workplace. This is a picture of Trent and I at our launch event that happened back in August. And for this launch, we broke a world record for the largest cardboard box forever. So we wanted to symbolically make space for this new conversation around mental fitness.
Yeah, we started working on our nonprofit in March of 2019, obviously about well before when we launched. And the reason why we started working on this is because of one of our friends who was a CEO of a Utah tech company. He died by suicide. It caught all of us by surprise. We didn't really realize that he was struggling. And so obviously as we struggled, we came together to grieve. As we were talking, we realized that there needed to be a bigger effort around mental health. And so we decided to start a nonprofit. As we started talking to people about this, we got two main main responses. First was, that's great. I also struggled. That there's so much need around this. Or the second response being, that's great. I know other people need this. And as I started to hear that more, I started to push back a little bit. And I said, well, don't you ever struggle with mental health? Don't you ever feel stressed or burned out? And they say, oh yeah, of course, everyone does. But I just don't have depression or something like that. And so as we realized that mental health itself had a stigma around it, we realized that we needed to reframe the conversation.
So this next part will show a little video about what this reframe is for mental fitness.
Mental health is not an illness. It's a normal part of every person's well-being, just like physical health. But mental health often gets ignored. Now, there's Room Here, a community of forward-thinking people and companies pledging to promote healthier minds at work. We call it mental fitness. Just like physical fitness, your mind needs healthy activities every day that promote well-being. Rest, relaxation, relationships, therapy as needed, plus nutrition, exercise, sunshine, and fun. We help people and companies find their healthiest minds. Every day, more companies earn our badge of honor. And you can too. Join the mental fitness movement today and sign the pledge for you or your company at roomhere.org.
This video illustrates mental fitness is kind of more of a holistic approach to taking care of our brain and our mental wellness. It includes not only those who are currently struggling with mental illnesses, but all of those who have a brain and are human, which is all of us. So, and even more than we know, mental illness is actually a very common thing. Statistically, 1 in 5 people are currently struggling with a diagnosable mental illness, whether they know it or not. So one piece of what Room Here does is helping those 1 in 5. And how we do this is, and a big piece is, one, to normalize this conversation around our mental fitness and our mental wellness. And the second thing is, how do we do this is through the workplace. We spend 8 to 10 hours a day at work and in the mentality of work and around our workplace culture. And now more than ever, work is combined with home life as well. So having workplace programs that focus on this and change that conversation has a huge effect on our daily life. And so Room Here is really focused on creating these resources and having these resources and pointing people to them to be able to have professional help and help change this conversation.
Most programs around will focus on those 1 in 5, which is so important that we give people that are struggling with a mental health condition the help that they need. But how does Room Here help the 4 out of 5, the people that aren't currently struggling with a diagnosable mental health condition? Well, firstly, in the same way, we normalize the conversation. Just like we need to normalize the conversation around those that have mental illness, we also need to normalize that working on your mental fitness is something, whether you have mental illness or not. Everyone needs to be working on their minds and their bodies. Secondly, we teach people how to support those in need. That's so important that as we have people that we meet and that we are around us, be they friends, family, coworkers, that we know how to help them when and support them when they are in times of need. And lastly, we empower people to engage in mental fitness because did you know that up to 80% of Americans will manage a mental health condition at some point in their lives? This is important for 2 reasons. First, people should be working on their mental fitness well before they are in a crisis time. And second, by normalizing the conversation before people have a crisis, it's more likely for them to seek help when they do have a crisis.
So we are really focused on normalizing this conversation. And how do we normalize it? We're combining efforts through a Room Here pledge, where companies and people can come together to raise their voices for this cause. So companies pledge to be Room Here companies, and they pledge to do 3 things: to measure their mental fitness culture, to make a plan to improve, and to share what they're doing and learning within their community. And we've seen many, many companies already sign up and start to raise their voices and make a difference in the work cultures. And then individuals, we invite you to become an ally to the conversation. We call our allies our roomies. And they are people who pledge to support others on their mental fitness journey. They pledge to tell the world that they're a roomie, identify themselves as, hey, I'm a safe person. I'm a person that we can have this conversation with. And they pledge to engage in mental fitness because they need to take care of themselves in order to also take care of others. And lastly, a roomie pledges to point others in need to professional resources. We're not the therapists if you're not trained to be so, but you can love support and point to great resources for help. It's been awesome to see as people have raised their voices, as I have done so. Almost every week, I have a few people reach out to me, sometimes complete strangers, sometimes friends in my network, reaching out for support. And I've been able to provide a lot of help to people and family and friends.
Yeah, so we encourage everyone to step up and be a roomie. As you can see here, there's a QR code that will take you to our website. You can also go to roomhere.org to sign the roomie pledge. But like Rachel said, the more we have people that step up, identify themselves as mental fitness allies, the more it becomes normal to say, hey, I need some help right now. Or what are you doing when you feel stressed, feel burned out? The more we normalize this conversation, the more we make it okay to seek advice and seek help, the more everyone will be able to work on their mental fitness together.
So we invite you to join the conversation. We'd love to work with you and help normalize this conversation more and spread this. So feel free to reach out to Trent or I, and we'd love to join arms with you and move forward this movement.
Working on the mental fitness of employees isn't new to many Utah companies. Before we close out today's event, we'll hear from two different local CEOs who've decided to commit time and resources to improve the mental fitness of their employees. And they've seen truly amazing results. Up first is the CEO of Purple, Joe Megabo.
Hi, I'm Joe Megabo, the CEO of Purple Innovation, and I'm thrilled to be able to join you today as part of Utah Community Builders' focus on workforce resilience through mental fitness. If you're not familiar with Purple, we are a local Utah-based manufacturer of comfort technology products led with our amazing mattresses and pillows, innovative designs of our own, and as I said, we are fundamentally a manufacturer, a core, which means we have now nearly 1,500 employees that we've needed to figure out how we can keep safe and productive over the last 8 months during these very challenging times. When COVID-19 first hit, we, as did many, had no idea what was in store and in front of us, and we pulled back. We actually furloughed about a third of our employees, which created a number of challenges right there. Fortunately, within a few weeks, we realized that we were seeing unprecedented demand for our products, and were able to get most of our employees back to work. And within about 6 weeks, we were fully back to work with all of our furloughed employees. And as everyone adjusted, our corporate headquarters were shut down, our employees on the corporate side were working remotely, and we were adapting and figuring out how to keep those in manufacturing and operations safe and productive. We realized there was a lot we didn't know about what was working and what wasn't working. And we started doing a series of surveys, flash surveys, and a little more formal surveys, as we realized we needed to figure out a way to get a feedback loop, a way to actually listen to what was happening and react to what we were hearing. An example of something we heard very early on was something we hadn't even considered and frankly didn't even know was an issue. As part of our standard benefits program that we offer our employees, part of what they get with their medical benefits is an EAP, an employee assistance plan. And what had happened during the first month as we were going through the furlough and bringing people back and all these adjustments is that the number of calls coming into our EAP had increased dramatically. And unfortunately, it wasn't set up for this kind of volume. And what we were hearing was one of two awful responses. Either A, we can't take you, we don't have capacity, we're sorry, or yes, we're happy to talk, but it's going to be many, many months in the future. And for those who are in need and we're reaching out and seeking help, that's just not an okay response. So we regrouped. We were thankful to have this knowledge and looked around to see, are there other options? Is there something else we can do for our employees? And that's where we found Blue Novus, just a terrific program that's really been focused on the emotional health of the employees that they work with and creating targeted individual touch points to help employees through a variety of needs. So we contracted with them, we got it available for our employees. We had to create a campaign to let our employees know about this and that we were serious, that we wanted it to be used. And it was something that was just a somewhat relentless campaign of ensuring that, please, it's available, don't forget, We want you to take advantage of it. And we saw very high adoption in double-digit percentages in the early days especially, and has continued to be very high engagement from our employees and our families, which has been a critical part of making sure that as these needs come up, we're able to service them. Now, we continue to dig and we continue to learn, and having a program like this allowed us to continue to engage with our employees, and we heard even more things. Like, for instance, on the corporate side, since we had shut down corporate headquarters, all our employees were working from home. And it turns out, while for many that was great, they see their kids more, they were around more, commuting times were obviously much lower. There were others that this presented significant challenges, which was something I'm not sure we had ever really considered. Whether it was not really having the space and the environment for productive work, given dual working spouses at home, kids at home and distance learning, and limited space and availability to spread out and have the work environment you need to be productive, or much worse things, those who have been challenged with substance abuse and we're seeing those demons reappear, or marital problems, or other even more awful abuse at home was starting to bubble up, and we were hearing these stories. And we realized we needed to get some of our employees out of their homes and find safe, productive working environments, but our corporate headquarters were closed. And we began to even rethink that. It's, what does closed mean? You know, do we have to fully reopen them? And we thought maybe we can do something in the middle. And we found a way where we could allow roughly about 10% of our employees to come in on any given day in a very controlled setting. You had to sign up ahead of time. We had all the same kinds of health standards that we had done in our operations and our manufacturing facilities, temperature checks and wearing masks and social distancing. We put dividers up around the cubes. We limited the number of chairs in the office. So we created a much safer environment, but it also solved a fundamental problem we were hearing and talking to our employees, which is we needed to get some of our employees out of their homes and into a safe environment where they could be productive and where they could be safe. And that all came from a fundamental thing we needed to do, which is keep asking our employees, are they okay? Keep giving them feedback loop opportunities where they could engage with us and we could listen and learn. Just the mere asking, I think, has been appreciated by the employees, but the fact that we've been able to identify areas where we're not getting it right, or where we thought we knew what was going on, but perhaps we didn't. And we've just continued to realize we don't have all the answers and we need to keep asking and keep listening. So with that, I really encourage all of you to make sure you know what's happening with your employees, that you focus on taking care of them, as these things are going to rear their heads one way or another, and better to get ahead of it, make sure that they're in their best shape, where you can get the productivity you need, you get the long-term relationships you need with your employees, which is obviously great for sustaining a healthy business. And with that, I'll leave you with, please stay healthy, be safe, and sleep well.
Our final speaker today is the CEO of Homey, Johnny Hanna. He's going to share with us his own experience, how they've impacted the way he manages his employees, and the benefits he sees for his entire company. Together with what Joe just told us, I think Johnny's presentation can help you see the benefits of creating an approach that works for your business.
A couple of years ago, our company was running low on cash and I was struggling. I was taking it personal and I could feel fear creeping in, and I started to feel like I was failing as the CEO. My co-founder and I decided to go and pitch our business plan to venture capital firms to raise money. All of the VCs we met with in LA, San Francisco, and New York City were looking for a business with hockey stick growth up and to the right. Our challenge was that our business looked a little more flat. We had flat year-over-year growth, and that's not a great time to raise money. Everyone was telling us no. It was awful. It took a few grueling months and many no's, but we finally got a term sheet that would provide us enough cash to get us to a solid place as a company. I could feel my anxiety and my stress subside. A week before closing on the funding, the deal fell through. I was devastated. I had failed. I had no other prospects and I felt a paralyzing fear. I wanted to check out. I wanted to fast forward so that I didn't have to live through the stories I was telling myself. I started asking myself, how? How can I fast forward? Could I go into a coma for a few months? As I entertained these thoughts, I recognized I was in a very dark place. I had no clue how things would work out, but they did. Everything ended up working out. Existing investors stepped in to help extend our runway, and business picked up, and we started to see amazing growth. As I took time to reflect on this experience, I wondered, what if I find myself in the same position again in the future? Would I turn to the same dark place? These thoughts motivated me to pay more attention to my own mental health. I started learning and growing and healing from my own insecurities and fear. I started helping others to do the same. I learned an amazing lesson from a therapist named Jody Hildebrandt. She said, peace comes from increased skill, not a change in circumstance. What this means is that finding peace isn't based on any random circumstance. If I had just raised $20 million, then I would have been enough as a CEO. Or once this COVID thing goes away, then I can finally get back to having a normal life. Some of your employees might think, once I get this promotion, then I will be happy. Or if my boss would just show me appreciation, I'd finally enjoy my job. Focusing on mental fitness has helped me to develop skills to have peace regardless of the circumstance. Whether or not I raised money for my company, I could have stayed centered and had peace. If COVID's here to stay, you can find peace. If you don't get that job promotion, you can still have peace. If your boss is a jerk, you can still have peace. It's a mental skill that can be developed. As I became more vocal and more vulnerable about what I had gone through and what I was learning with coworkers, I heard about really hard challenges they had faced and were facing. With COVID, the economy, natural disasters, crazy elections, they've all taken a toll on our mental health. My employees' stories motivated me to roll out a mental fitness program to the whole company. It's been a game changer for everyone that has taken the time to learn these principles. I've learned that mental fitness is foundational to a company's culture. Mental fitness training teaches you how to live your company values. I've come to better understand how to live our value of humility. I can now see how my ego stems from my insecurities, which stem from fear. I can better understand how to live our value of balance, that it's necessary to set boundaries and to stick to them. You are in control of you and are the only one to blame if your work-life balance is out of whack. I've learned that our value of loyalty starts with self-care and self-love. You aren't going to be loyal to anyone if you aren't loyal to yourself. After a mental fitness lesson on drama, another employee told me he had wasted company resources because he had gone around gossiping. He had accused another team member of something they didn't do. He told me he was happy to face whatever consequence he needed to face. I asked him if he had gone around cleaning things up. He explained to me how he went to each person and apologized, and then went to the individual he was gossiping about. He apologized and explained how he had gone around making things right. His desire to have his mind clear of any drama and past mistakes motivated him to reach out directly to me and clean it up. Other employees have felt enough safety and trust with me to share how they have had severe struggles. I would have had no idea had we still had a stigma around mental health at work. I was able to follow up and make sure these coworkers got the help they needed to heal. What I've come to understand is that as a society, we have neglected our minds. We have normalized personal hygiene and keeping physically fit, but we have ignored our mind and being mentally fit. I know as leaders, we have an obligation to lead on issues like this. I've also come to learn how anyone that comes to my company will be able to leave with new tools and can walk away being a better person. Regardless of the success or failure of any business venture I participate in, I know I'll succeed by teaching principles of mental fitness. I hope you can join us in helping to eliminate the stigma by being a vulnerable leader and by introducing mental fitness principles to your coworkers. Thank you.
Now that you've heard from this impressive slate of experts, advocates, and business leaders, we invite you to participate in the ongoing Workforce Resilience Through Mental Fitness campaign.
But before we go, here's some quick instructions about the next steps for the campaign from Nick Dunn, who is directing our Utah Community Builders efforts.
Thank you, Clark and Lisa, and thanks to all of our presenters today. For those of you watching, you might be thinking, all this information is great, but what now? There are 3 simple things you can focus on as you move forward. Number 1, review the Suicide Prevention in the Workforce Employer Toolkit. There's a handy worksheet in the appendix with some simple questions and action items to help you get started. Things like reviewing company policies that affect employee well-being, asking employees to help in the discussion, and much more. Number 2, we're launching a series of monthly webinars where we'll dive into many of the topics you heard about today with more in-depth education, as well as opportunities for questions and discussion. These are starting in November and continue all the way through May 2021. Number 3, an online resource page for business leaders. This will host all the content you saw today, as well as the Suicide Prevention in the Workforce Employer Toolkit, and additional resources from some of our key community partners, some of which are offered free or discounted exclusively to Chamber members. Look for details on all of this in your email inboxes after this event concludes. Lastly, just to reiterate, mental fitness is about all of us, whether downstream, like anyone who's dealing with a severe mental health crisis, or upstream, someone who's just facing additional stress or anxiety that's affecting their work and their family. Creating a culture of mental fitness helps all of us to create the most resilient workforce and, by extension, the most resilient state in the nation. With that, I'll turn it back to Clark and Lisa.
I just want to point out how important this effort is. Every one of you watching this can help save lives. We can make a real difference in the lives of all of our employees.
And building up greater resilience among our employees by creating a culture of mental fitness really will make a difference in the lives of thousands of Utahns, their families, and our entire state.
So look for more information to come on this campaign, as well as many other social impact efforts from Utah Community Builders. Together, we can all ensure that Utah is renowned locally and across the nation as the state of good.
Thanks to all of today's presenters. And Clark and Lisa, thank you. That was an impressive list of speakers and a wealth of information and resources in today's presentations that will help Utah's CEOs, presidents, HR directors, and managers to help build a greater resilience and mental fitness among all workers in Utah. In addition to thanking today's presenters, I also want to thank and recognize the Huntsman Foundation for their dedication, efforts, and work and investment in this important area of mental health, and for their partnership with the Utah Community Builders. To close, I want to share one final thought. When we talk about Utah's greatest asset for the future, we talk about our children, and we correctly say that outside of the home, school has one of the biggest impacts on a child's well-being and future success. Well, that same concept holds true for all of us adults. Outside of our home and our families, our work has one of the most significant impacts on our well-being and our long-term success. Utah has an unparalleled economy, even amidst this pandemic-induced recession. By implementing some simple yet important steps today, Utah's business leaders can help ensure our workforce mental fitness and resilience is also unparalleled. This in turn will ripple through our families and our communities, lifting us all up to be better equipped, to work together, to defeat the pandemic, to restore our economic strength, and to meet the challenges and opportunities of the future together. Thank you for joining us today.